everybody, and welcome back to another round of Modern Melee here in a new booth between Hardened Scales and Blue-White Control. My name is Ginkgo.
And my name is Marco.
Marco, what do we have today?
We have blue-white control. Very excited about this one against green-white hardened scales.
That's right. Blue-White Control actually an underplayed deck in my opinion right now, and it got a lot of tools in the several printings, in several new additions to Magic's cards, the latest of which is March of Otherworldly Light.
Yeah, and I think this card will definitely ignite the resurgence of this deck list. I assume that we'll see it more often.
Here we see a Welding Jar into an Esper Sentinel from Hardened Scales and a tap land only from Blue-White Control, but this is exactly the spot where Blue-White wants to be. Taking the first lumps of damage, then board wipes and counterspells all the way through the game.
Welding Jar definitely not the best card in against Blue-White Control.
Exactly.
Since,
all of its removal is exile based.
Yes, exactly.
But here is a card that can do some work against it. This is Urza Saga, and the Esper Sentinel crunches in for 1. This is the namesake card actually also being played, the Hardened Scales. Pretty good setup from the deck.
Yeah, it looks good. Though it's very early, and since control is not being pressured too much, I think the position of the deck is still quite comfortable.
Exactly. Here is a Zabaz also being played from the Urza Saga, coming in as a 2-2 because of the Hardened Scales. From the control player, only 2 tap lands, but this doesn't mean they do not have any untapped ones. It only means they can afford to play the tap lands there.
Here we have 3 open mana for Blue-White Control. Now this is a point where Blue-White Control has several decisions to make. Do they hold up mana for Charm? Do they start removing the things on the enemy board? And this decision is
March of the Otherworldly Light on the Urza Saga. Remember that Urza Saga is an enchantment and March of Otherworldly Light can exile it, and 1 has been paid for the Esper Sentinel. This is not only a threat that has been dealt with, but also a landfall that has been neutered by the blue-white player. And an ingenious smith adding to the board. Now we'll see if it can get an artifact. There are several artifact lands also in this list, which can also be found, which is also good, but only replacement Zabaz in the hand and crunching in for 3.
Exactly. So let's talk a bit about this matchup. In your opinion, which deck has the advantage game 1?
I would say Blue-White Control, but this is only because I do think that Blue-White Control is extremely favored in a lot of matchups that we have seen being played recently. And also now that Luris is gone, rest in pieces, we do not have any recursion from decks such as Hardened Scales. But on the other hand, Hardened Scales can win out of nowhere, because something like, for example, now 2 Hardened Scales on the board and just 1 threat can win the game, and this is a neat trick. Zabaz being played, it has modular. When it dies, and it will die as state-based actions because there is another legendary creature named Zabaz on the battlefield, it will distribute its modular counters, and let's not forget that 3 counters will be placed on Zabaz, and then each of them will pick up another 1 from the Hardened Scales. So this is an Archmage's Charm countering the Zabaz, probably, stealing the Esper Sentinel.
Exactly, stealing
No,
the Esper.
no. The control player just drew 2 cards.
Interesting. Okay, so he pointed the Esper Sentinel because he paid for the Esper Sentinel
Yeah,
tax before the counters. Because if he waited, if the control player waited until after Esper Sentinel got its taxes, he would need to pay
a lot
a
more.
lot more.
And as we said, there has been a giant Esper Sentinel pointed at the life total of the control player, but well, Solitude taking care of problems without any mana, just exiling Wrath of God effect, and probably another one coming in close afterwards, because this is a lot of power on the board, even while the Esper Sentinel has been gone.
Okay, so the control player passing the turn with 5 open mana, and this is something that control players like to do. They just represent everything in their hand, and
Yeah. And not only 5 open mana, but in face of like 15 damage, they
yeah,
drew 2 cards and not
yeah,
countered,
yeah,
but drew 2 cards.
yeah. That's some confidence. That's some confidence.
Yes. And here is the Ingenious Smith growing by 1, but actually by 3 because of 2 hardened scales. And this is what we meant by explosiveness from the hardened scales.
Especially the white color that has been recently added to this archetype with Ingenious Smith and cards like Blacksmith Skill. These are amazing additions to the deck that can really snowball the game in many different ways.
Exactly. And another Solitude being played this time for 5 mana, exiling the real threat. The control player is at 8, the hardened scales player at 34, but it does not matter. Life total will be dwindled down once they have no cards in hand, and if they cannot do something as kill the you control player with infect, it will be almost impossible to catch back, because also Solitude has lifelink.
Exactly. So I think this particular round is amazing showcase of what blue-white control has become with all the removals: Solitude, March, Prismatic Ending.
Yeah, they have their pick now, and white is now the color of best removal? Question mark. It has almost never been so.
Yeah.
And not only best removal for specific situations, but best removal for the diversified removal. And this is the third one, the third Solitude being played, taking out the 6/6 Zabaz and giving the hardened scales player more life, but that doesn't matter. The control player does take 2 infect, but as long as you have 9 infect or 1 infect, it's almost always the same.
Exactly. Though attacking with 2 nexuses seems like the last resort that the hardened scales player has. His board has been exhausted, his hand has been almost completely exhausted by the control player.
Yeah, but we see now that the cards in hand are 1 for the hardened scales and 2 for the blue-white control, but there is a Solitude as well in the hand. But I do think that the hardened scales player switched to infect now when they saw that the regular damage is probably not possible. There is also colonnade hiding there in the lands of the blue-white player, but they are not firing it off. This means more removal, more control.
Yes, exactly. Celestial Colonnade, very traditional blue-white control card. Sometimes instead of this, a Hall of the Storm Giant is that the name?
Hall of the Storm Giant, yes.
Yeah.
But it's a giant beater, but it also takes a lot more mana.
Yes,
and it's not a flyer.
That's true.
And blue-white control can take its time. There was somewhere Walking Ballista played, but it has been countered with Archmage's Charm, and this Solitude continuing to chip away. It was 42 to 8, now it's more manageable, 36 to 16. Two more infects coming in, but the Colonnade gets activated, and the Colonnade probably blocking one of them, getting one infect counter, -1/-1 counter on it, but it doesn't matter as long as the blue-white player stays alive, it's all good.
Exactly. So one infect counter more, but really nothing to worry about. Scales player is definitely top decking, while now control player is sitting on, I think, 2 cards.
I do think 2 cards in hand, yes. This can be, or 3 even, this can be anything from March of Otherworldly Light to something less important, in this case, like Counterspell, but whatever it is, Colonnade will chip in, get another infect counter, -1/-1 actually counter on itself. Welding Jar will be placed there to save the land from destruction, but still, chipping away like this will take some time.
Definitely. Can we call this possibly garbage time?
Not yet, actually.
Not yet.
I would not take it from the hardened scales to just do a flourish or two and finish the game with something like a bait spell into something else, or actually an attack into a bait spell into a real spell. And we know that every Walking Ballista, everything that gets 1 counter actually gets 3 counters.
Yes, that is
And
true.
there is also something to be mindful of. And Colonnade doing its duty, getting in front of those Nexi or Nexuses. Meanwhile, solitudely on the board, just chipping away at the opponent's life total.
It's worth noting that the control player is on 5 infect damage, and Celestial Colonnade has 3 minus counters on it.
Yes, so the next time it will actually trade with the Incredible
Exactly.
But one card, this is a good one, Archbound Ravager. Sacking itself, first of all, it comes in with 3 counters instead of just 1. And if this resolves and the attack goes through, it can be sacked on the unblocked Infector. And if this is a big if, but if the control player doesn't have any response, sacking on the unblocked one gives it more than enough damage, infect damage. So this is why I said I wouldn't just write off the hardened scales.
Indeed.
But this is actually a disciplined move from both sides. Neither does the blue-white player activate the Colonnade, nor does the Hardened Scales player activate the Arcbound Ravager, because whoever blinks first loses. And we have seen end step Snapcaster Mage into Archmage's Charm, drawing actually cards.
Wow, this is some amazing plays for both these players. I wrote off wrongfully wrote off the Hardened Scales player. Definitely, you proved me wrong, and it is very tight. It is very tight.
Indeed. Prismatic Ending taking care of the Arcbound Ravager. There is no more immediate threat, but also blue-white player is now at 7 in fact. Only one of them needing to connect, so 2 of them needing to connect now and 1 of them needing to connect next time, and that's it.
Control player fetching.
Yeah, there is still the Colonnade that has 3 -1/-1 counters, so it can trade with one of them. But we will see. I do not think that the Hardened Scales player plays any pump spells, but maybe some snakeskin veils can find their way usually from the sideboard, but maybe also
Usually
in
from the
main.
sideboard.
Yeah.
And, we'll see. Yeah, it would be interesting to see this in main. But okay, it's Celestial Colonnade trading with one Nexus, and the other one is doing the 8 infect
Yeah.
counter.
And we see during this 5 or 10 rounds of combat that the 40 or so life from the hardened scales does not matter. The 8 life from the blue-white control didn't matter in the end. So blue-white control using their life as a resource to the everlasting extent, however much they can. And now dwindling away at the opponent's life total as well.
Soon, this Inkmut Nexus might stay to defend.
Oh, this is a Shark Typhoon.
Okay.
This is a Shark Typhoon to block, and the Shark will get a -1/-1 counter, but this is a large Shark, and I do think... Oh, okay. I was about to say now there is no Infector, but we see another one, the fourth Nexus, yes. But I do think that the Shark should be coming now, but also, what is this? Oh, upkeep, probably upkeeping the Castle Ardenvale to scry 2.
Is the card called Ardenvale?
I don't know. One of the castles. Ventress, probably. I don't know. With the blue castle one, yes.
The blue castle.
And keeping one of the cards. This is what we have seen, and this is an Archon Ravager with 3 counters on itself, and once it's still on the stack probably. Oh yeah.
Okay. Counterspell.
Play old Counterspell, taking care of it.
Attacking for 1 infect damage.
And now on 9.
9 infect for control player.
But still, also infect is a resource.
Wow, I would be shaking. I could, my hands would be shaking trying to untap these lands. But this player very stoically.
This is a player who knows what they're dealing with and how to deal with it, and they're just sending into the red zone presumably next turn or the turn after. The Hardened Scales player is dead to regular damage, to a moppy beat down of 2 1s and 3/2 lifelinkers. This is also hard cast Shark Typhoon. And this is a Chalice of the Void for 1.
Creating a shark.
Yes,
that is
a 2/2 shark. This is the more important thing of the matter. The Chalice of the Void is absolutely late to the party, but the shark is just on point.
Very true, very true. So, are there any outs for the Scales player?
I wouldn't say in this. Now, after so many back and forths and 9 infects, I do think they will be short, and yeah, they are just packing it in.
Okay, game 1 is done. Going to the blue-white control player. Amazing showcase. These players really seem to be very good at their respective decks, and I loved seeing how versatile they can get with their plays.
Both playing to their outs.
Yeah,
both of them,
exactly.
And doing this very well. It could have swung either way, honestly, because one great top deck or one counterspell less from the blue-white player does all the difference. And we see, looking at a dress down and spreading seas from the blue-white player, possibly for the sideboard, but they probably decide against it. There is a lot of hate for the artifacts in general in the color white and in the color blue as well, in something like Hercules Recall or anything else can just bounce the whole board. From the other side, there is the Hardened Scales that can protect actually from those pesky removals.
Sorry, which card?
You just mentioned one blacksmith skills. There is a
right.
snakeskin's veil, which is actually in this particular deck probably even more powerful because not only it protects, but it also gives a +1/+1 counter, which can, as we saw, become 2, 3, 4 counters at a creature. So what we have now is the explosiveness from the hardened scales versus the inevitability of blue-white control. Let's see how it pans out in game
but before we get into the match, I'll take this time to remind everyone that you can freely go like and subscribe to this channel and this video.
Exactly.
And it doesn't cost you anything, and it's great for us and it's great for you. You can also turn on the notification bell to be reminded when our new videos come up.
Exactly. And I would like to take this opportunity to thank our first 100 subscribers. Here is to several zeros more. And thank you all for liking this content and supporting what we do. We are getting along with some upgrades. I hope this is plain to see. But hang along with us on this crazy ride as we take you through our small metagame and what it entails.
We are truly thankful, and we hope to bring you more and more content that you will enjoy. Okay.
Round 2 on the way, starting with hardened scales. Nothing.
Debating the turn 1.
Dark Slate shows. No, this is the other one. No, I was commenting about the land, but this is Zabaz. In this deck is a curious actually addition. First, I was skeptical, but now I know that this is actually a sack fodder and also a sack outlet. And this is actually pretty reminiscent of the game 1. A land into Zabaz, into Urza Saga, into Ingenious Smith, and from the blue-white player, the same tap land as before.
Yeah, but a great opening for a Scales player. Definitely, the control player will have some problems with clearing this board, especially as early as this and playing on the draw.
Yeah, but we see also actually the welding jars staying in. So this might be to do with the blue-white sideboard answers to the artifacts. But as you said before, in the main board, all of the blue-white's artifact and other destruction is exile-based.
Yes.
But we will see what this entails.
I guess there is a supreme verdict that destroys.
That's true.
Creatures.
Several copies in the main and probably more in the sideboard.
Yes, exactly.
And because of this, probably, and because of the imminent pressure from the left side, we see a Shark Typhoon being cycled for 0, actually just to draw a card.
Oh, we have
probably
some...
Oh, okay. We have some problems with everything
cards.
With cards. What is going on? There is the... Oh, yeah, okay, just trying to get the right token.
Okay, those are tokens that really came down.
Saga taking up to 3, making another construct token. This one is in the form of the first Iron Man and Saga tutoring up something with mana value 1. So in this deck, it is not the Shadow Spear. This is the Ozolith that is being tutored by the Saga, and this is an extremely powerful engine that rewards actually sacrificing various artifacts and other counters actually that can be put on the Ozolith, and then further down the line in every beginning of combat phase, put on any creature.
So for anyone who doesn't know what the Ozolith does, it takes counters onto itself. If a creature died that had some +1/+1 counters, or even -1/-1 counters,
Or any other counters, actually.
counters, those counters don't disappear, they go onto the Ozolith. And then at the beginning of the combat of the player who controls the Ozolith can't disperse the counters any way the player wants.
On one creature.
On one creature, of course.
And there is actually Archmage's Charm trying to take one of the constructs, but Zabaz munching on it, and one counter will go on it probably. No, this just says munch on target artifact you control. But actually the control player takes a lot of damage because those constructs are really huge. 19-7 in favor of the Hardened scales. We saw this is no indication of that somebody is winning or losing, but the blue-white control player deep in the tank, if they had a Supreme Verdict, I do think it would have been cast by now.
Yeah, although it wouldn't be the best answer since there is Ozolith and a Welding Jar on the board. Instead, little Teferi is being played, bouncing...
the construct.
Oh, okay, the construct.
The
so
token.
Killing it.
Killing the token. A Prismatic Ending does a buzz, so it cannot munch on more artifacts, and the Ozolith says when a creature leaves the battlefield, not when it dies. So this is much more important now with exile-based removal, because it picks up the +1/+1 counters from the actual Zabaz that has been exiled.
Okay, so control player definitely not in the best position.
Oh, I do think that Hardened Scales players thought this was Path to Exile, but it's actually Prismatic Ending. They wanted to search up a basic land to the battlefield, but we have it retcon.
Okay, so we remind everyone that we have a policy of casual magic. So this kind of mistakes are we tolerate this kind of mistakes,
Of course. And it has been rectified before anybody could do anything.
Yes.
So this is all good and fine. From a mighty board, now there is only the Genius Smith on the board, but 4 mana gets a Walking Ballista and another counter on the Ingenious Smith, who is now a 4/4, crunching in probably towards the player's life total.
Another counter from Ozolith being placed on the Smith, and that brings the control player in the range of Ballista lethal damage.
Exactly. Second game goes to Hardened Scales. Let's see if there will be any more sideboarding done between draw and play, or we are just going into game 3. Interesting enough, it was not the explosiveness from Hardened Scales, but perseverance that did the game.
Exactly. I think that kind of perseverance in this particular match might be even better than explosiveness.
The Ozolith giving it a little bit of staying power is definitely something to take note of. Because if it weren't there, I know it was just 1 damage, but just 1 damage was enough between the blue-white player dying and staying on the board, and probably having a grip full of removal, counterspells, and anything else that they could throw at the face of the Hardened Scales player.
Also, it's important to note, though game 1, though the blue-white control is a deck that really has a lot of removal, and game 1 it showed us that. Game 2, possibly game 1, it had more removal than usually, and game 2 was perhaps...
Yeah, exactly. There is not every card in the blue-white is just removal. This is a control deck through and through, and a good control deck takes advantage of its surroundings, of its metagame. knowing what the actual numbers are is hard and difficult to understand if you are going in a naked meta game in terms of you don't know what you are facing against. But facing against a known meta game, control decks thrive because control has all the answers they need. But to have the right answers at the right time is a little bit more difficult.
True.
And also, deck choices do play a lot in favor or against such decks. Esper Sentinel being played from the Hardened Scales player into a Triome from the blue-white control. Game 3 is on the way.
Esper Sentinel being a great card in many situations, but thinking about this card against blue-white control, I feel like blue-white control plays against this card much better than other decks, because the fact it's a slow deck. It takes its time.
It does, yes. The best thing that the blue-white control got in the recent years was Archmage's Charm because it has built-in card advantage. They do not play any cantrips anymore, so they can just ignore the effects such as Talia or Esper Sentinel, and they can just wait another turn. If they really need to, they can get the card to the opponent, but they do not have to.
We saw turn 2 Chalice being immediately answered by Prismatic Ending.
Not only the blue-white control can play Prismatic Ending.
Yeah, exactly. But I see that the Scales player was really ready for this Chalice, so I didn't expect him to be so ready, to be honest.
And another Prismatic Ending, paying the one, as they say, for the Esper Sentinel, at the Esper Sentinel, and the board is clear. This definitely favors the blue-white control, but it has been answer after answer for both of them. And we will see now, in response to the Ingenious Smith, or just shortcutting, the blue-white control is fetching, and the Ingenious Smith is finding an Arcbound Ravager. This is a powerful card, less so without any artifacts on the board. But
I think that Scales player might be missing. Okay, he's not missing. But
I was about also to ask. But this is Zabaz actually not coming out. This card just surprises me more and more. And another counter on the Ingenious Smith from an empty board to a sizable threat. Some players do call this card White Tarmogoyf because it grows linearly, but it does grow fast.
It can. Both of these cards can grow in certain situations, but I think that the Ingenious Smith is a value card. If left on the board, it can become a nightmare.
Yeah, it is either the Abyss for one player because it needs to be chumped every turn, or it warrants a removal spell, or it will just dwindle the opponent's life total down every time more and more.
Yes, true. And we do seem to have some...
No, just the blue-white player is deep in the tank.
Oh, okay. I thought we had some technical issues, but no, it was just thinking. It's not something I do when I play my hammer time, you know.
Celestial Colonnade being placed down, and the turn pass to Hardened Scales player, who plays another land and probably crunching in, but before that, probably also another artifact to grow the Ingenious Smith, Esper Sentinel, as we said. And interestingly, paying 1 life for it.
In response, while Esper is on the stack, control player draw 2.
As we saw during this whole game, extreme patience from the control player, extreme value of their fullness of their hand, and just having the right answers at the right time. As we said, the control player needs right answers at the right time. One of the best ways to have them is to have a full grip.
Exactly.
And another Hardened Scales from the deck into an attack for 4 into just pass. Land go. Love to see it.
The best turn that blue-white control can have.
Exactly. That means, but in all honesty, that means they are not in pressure. They do not fear for their life, and they can just give the turn over and be as reactive as possible. But the Ozolite can complicate these matters because it can store the +1/+1 counters, and each counter that it gets stored will be basically doubled by the Hardened Scales. An attack there into a Shark Typhoon. This is a shark for 3, probably jumping the Esper Sentinel or the Zabaz. I don't think they will, not jumping but munching on, yes, the Esper Sentinel, because as much as they can play around it, it's still a little bit of a nuisance. And the Zabaz will actually eat itself and put 2 +1/+1 counters on the Esper Sentinel, which, because of the Hardened Scales, which will trade with the Shark token, and 3 counters will be stored on the Ozolite again because of the Hardened Scales, and 4 damage going through. Now 9 to 18 in favor of Hardened Scales, but life total, as we know, does not matter so much.
Hardened Scales player killing 2 of its creature without a blink.
Exactly. There is also, not to forget, one Infect Boy hiding in the lands of the Hardened Scales player, and 3 counters becoming 4 counters. There is 2 turn clock if nothing is done against it. So this is also something to consider. But another answer for the Ozolith, and a disaster averted.
Yeah, the control player saw the Inkpot Nexus eyeing those counters, and he said, no, wait.
And another one, the same one actually, with Snapcaster Mage on the Ingenious Smith, and the board is clear.
And we are in garbage time.
Probably, yeah. Now we can probably see, well, actually this is the last round that the blue-white player will be tapped down, and if the Hardened Scales player can mount a meaningful pressure this turn, then we are still not in garbage time. But if they cannot, then... But we also know that they have an Arcbound Ravager, exactly, which the Ingenious Smith found some turns ago, and this is actually also beautiful because this is 4 infect counters, again killing their own creatures without blinking an eye, because now the plan is infect.
Yeah, it's a 3-turn counter, but we might see some additional counters next turn. Also, it's important to note that there is a Celestial Colonnade in the ranks of control players' lands.
Yes, we'll see. There are cards, as we said, like Snakeskin Whale, which can protect, but also a full grip of cards from the blue-white control player. This is the Ozolith. This is one of the better draw steps, but without...
Enabler?
Yes, just pass. This is just a pass, and
it smells like garbage.
Smells like garbage time, especially when the blue-white player is activating the castle to try to put any garbage on the bottom and just draw gas. And this is definitely not a good sign for the Hardened Scales player, tanking and thinking, do I want those cards? Or just, I can do better.
I can do better.
Yeah. And if they do not scry in the upkeep, then that means that they already have several answers and they can afford not to know what they're drawing into. Snapcaster Mage, dwindling the life total, there is no pressure. They will try to block, but there is the Solitude, and this is probably garbage time now.
Yeah, baiting out the Inkmoth Nexus, getting rid of it, getting rid of the land. But 3 counters are on the Ozolite. Or perhaps there should be 4.
Yeah, probably because the hardened scales. I mean, these are the triggers that can be missed, especially in a long
Mm-hmm.
game, like Hangerback Walker coming in with 1 counter, being that 2 counters from the hardened scales in combat, 3 counters should be 4, now it's 6 on the Hangerback Walker.
Mm-hmm.
All of a sudden, this Hangerback Walker is scary.
It is scary, but it doesn't have effect. Though control player is on 8 life, so it can be scary.
Not only that, this is a roadblock for all the creatures that are on the ground. Maybe even Solitude will suicide itself
Yeah, I've
just for
seen
3 life.
exactly. I've seen a control player doing this game 1. He actually suicided.
Or there's another removal spell that exiles. And we are just talking about hypothetical things.
Yeah, we are trying to find topics to talk about in this obvious garbage time. If I know garbage time,
This is also another Solitude, just getting rid of the Hangerback Walker. Do not go to the graveyard, do not die, exile instead. 6 counters being placed on the Ozolite. This is important for further and future creatures, but meanwhile, the blue-white player just inching further and further away.
And that's Stony Silence.
Stony Silence. And we can also be silent for a second because this is definitely a punch in the gut for for the Hardened Scales player.
Stony Silence, of course, and enchantment for 3 mana to 2 mana, white and any, and it says activated abilities of artifacts cannot be activated.
This includes a whole lot of shenanigans from the Hardened Scales player, and this is an attack for 3, 6, 7, 8, and the blue-white player is suddenly in the lead not only on the board but also in cards in hand and on the life total. This is an Inkmoth Nexus, and it will get, regardless of its summoning sickness, it can be turned into a creature and pick up 7 counters, which means it is lethal next turn because of the infect. There is still the Celestial Colonnade to worry about.
It's important to note that when Inkmoth Nexus becomes creature, it becomes artifact, but before it becomes creature, it's not an artifact. That's why it can be activated despite the Stone Silence.
That's it. Maybe, no, 3, 6, still 8 if the blue-white player swings out. I do not think that the Hardened Skies player needs to jump a block with the Inkmoth Nexus and drawing 2 cards with Archmage's Charm last turn. I do think that blue-white control player has answers in their hand.
And of course, there is a Colonnade that has flying. So,
and not to say that the Hardened Scales player is without any answers, but this is the little Teferi that will shut off any and all instant speed shenanigans. So anything less than a land removal will not kill Colonnade right now because it can be activated in combat before blocks, and in combat you cannot cast sorceries.
the Fairy Time Raveler bouncing 1 Solitude. So the answer for the Inkmoth Nexus is definitely now in control player's hand.
If they didn't have it, now they have
Yes.
like 3 answers. And the life total is 6 to 20, and with this Solitude in hand, it can be played at the end step for extra 3 points of damage regardless of the block or not, and the Hardened Scales player extends the hand, and we have a 2 to 1 for the blue-white control player. The Hardened Scales player showing their hand, and it was indeed garbage time.
Amazing plays from both these players. I think they are both very, very good at masters of their respective decks, as I mentioned before. So this was a great showcase of both decks, and I enjoyed it thoroughly.
Me too. Thank you all for watching. Like, comment, and subscribe, and see you next time.
Bye.